We finally found it. The perfect argument against God. Lawrence Krauss versus William Lane Craig on Nash Kyalo YouTube channel. Liking it. We're about to check this bad boy out and see what happens.
So, obviously, you know the question. Well, the answer to the question is kind of obvious. We could get out of here quickly. It's no, but
hey, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen. Like this video, comment down below. Lawrence Krauss already opening up with a banger. Here we go.
But certainly, if numbers matter, it's definitely not reasonable to believe in God. You know, humans created lots of gods over their history. Every single thing that happened to humans involved a god at some point or another over the time. The sun, the moon, the planets, the winds, the oceans. There have been over at least estimates of 1,000 different gods over human history, okay? And there are lots of names, and we've gotten rid of them. Dr. Craig doesn't believe in them. Almost all of them, but one.
I love these kind of thought experiments, you know, while they're debating.
So it's just a difference of one. He's an atheist about all these other gods for a good reason. That we've gotten rid of them because we now understand how the universe works, and we understand those stories are just stories that are inconsistent with the way the universe works. It's rational inquiry and physical understanding that has done that. I mean, the example that it reminds me of, you know, people don't, when it's not raining, you could pray for rain, or you can go to a meteorologist, and farmers will in general go to meteorologists now because it works, and that's the fundamental difference. Now, God is at best irrelevant, and I mean at best irrelevant. Science has gotten rid of God from pretty well everywhere God used to reside. Used to have angels pushing the planets in orbits around the sun. Newton got rid of that. Used to be special creation, as we'll get to this. Every species looked like it was fine-tuned for the conditions in which it lived, meaning there had to be design. Does that argument seem familiar to you? Have you just heard it? Okay, well, that was the argument that was applied to life, but Darwin showed, in fact, natural selection and genetic mutation could easily, in fact, not only could easily, but does explain the diversity of life on Earth. Biochemistry, while we don't yet know the origin of life on Earth, is quickly convincing us that there's no divine spark, nothing difference between animate and inanimate matter except for biochemical processes. And I suspect in the lifetime of almost everyone in this room, given that most of you are younger than us, we will, in fact, learn how chemistry turned into biology. We also learned that even matter can be created and destroyed. Physics has taught us that, and as I've written, and we've discussed, we can learn that universes can be created and destroyed, no problem. So many of the things we needed God for are no longer there. But it's worse than that, of course. Why are some people hanging on to that one remaining God?
William Lane Craig.
I mean, if you ask yourself, how likely is it, given the complete lack of evidence for any divinity, that Yahweh, or whatever you want to call him, is not, and not
or whatever you want to call them,
the other 999 gods that we've dispensed with, how likely it is that one God exists? Well, it's unlikely, given that, you know, the plethora of all the rest don't exist, and Christian apologists would argue against all the rest. Why, given what we know, do we want to apply everything that we don't understand to an invisible man in the sky when there's been no evidence whatsoever that any invisible man in the sky actually exists? And not only that, which invisible man in the sky? Because even in the modern monotheistic religions, there are incredible inconsistencies, and only one of them can be right. In fact, on the stage the other day, I asked Dr. Craig, what about Islam? And of course, he said Islam is wrong. So that invisible man in the sky, who has his own set of values and morals and claims, is inconsistent. So even if you accept this one God, the God depends upon, as you'll see, where you live. But the most important thing is our current understanding of nature has actually changed. We call it learning. It's developed since the claims were first made by peasants, Iron Age peasants, who didn't even know the Earth orbited the sun.
So I mean, a lot of atheists will throw this out there. I want to be factually correct. These are educated scribes in the ancient world, and yes, they still didn't know these details scientifically, but they were educated in the ancient world.
We've learned about how the universe works, and that has changed our opinion. And in fact, it's told us that the scriptures are inconsistent with what we know about science, empirical science and reason. So it's completely unreasonable to accept these old explanations because they just don't work. They disagree with the evidence. But finally, there's nothing absolutely new or special about Jesus. He's just as unpleasant as all the other gods. And all the stories of Jesus have occurred elsewhere.
Now, all the stories of Jesus occurred elsewhere. I can hear William Lane Craig freaking out about this. It's like, I already know, kind of taps into the zeitgeist stuff. But yeah, no, it's not that. There are elements in the story that clearly do appear elsewhere, though.
In fact, I would argue most people who even call themselves religious choose reason over God. For many reasons. Most people who believe in the Judeo-Christian God don't really believe in most part. The way people are happy to call themselves Christians or Jews, but they pick and choose from the scriptures. They say, well, Jonah didn't live inside a whale. I don't really like the idea that Lot told the people of Sodom, it's okay, rape my daughters because I don't want you to rape the angels. So go rape my daughters because they're just women, and women are chattel, and it's okay. I doubt many Catholics actually believe, in fact, I would be amazed to find any, including priests, who believe that when a priest blesses a wafer, it turns into the body of a first-century Jew. I was on a stage with several people from the Vatican astronomer, and several colleagues of mine, religious Catholics, and I asked them if any of them believed in the virgin birth, and not one of them would say they did. Now, the only thing, as Dr. Craig has pointed out, that seems to have gotten any currency is the resurrection. That's the one thing, and I was just talking to a member of the City Bible Forum who was happy enough to drive me to the airport in Sydney, and they said it was the resurrection that convinced him. And I think for Dr. Craig, it's probably the resurrection. We've already discussed this before. But, the point is, many of my colleagues, when I write a paper, they say, it's wrong, your paper's wrong, and I did it first. And I think that's the point. There's nothing new about a resurrection. It's as old as every god and every creation myth. There's lots of examples. Dionysus and Jesus are so close to being identical. They both were born from a virgin mother. They both had a divine father. They both were resurrected. They both transformed wine into water, etc., etc., etc.
I don't know if Salome was a virgin, per se. There might be a source in the ancient world that depicts her as a virgin. But yes, Dionysus and Jesus are very closely related. And yes, he has a resurrection. But it isn't the same exact identical resurrection story that we find with Jesus. Whoop-de-doo, he dies and rises from the dead. So does Heracles and other gods.
Osiris, the Egyptian god of life, death.
Osiris.
In fact, the new kingdom, this is almost 2,000 years before Christ, in principle, the idea was that people would be resurrected with Osiris if they followed the correct religious rituals. But the point about the resurrection is that there's no evidence of it. There's no evidence it would pass muster in a science lab, much less a court of law. It's hearsay, stories written based on oral traditions decades or hundreds of years after the fact, which are inconsistent with each other. There's nothing, when Dr. Craig tells me, and I said it before, historians of the Bible, theologians and people, scholars of the Bible, all accept that the resurrection happened. It reminds me of when I debate alien abduction experts who say, well, all alien abduction experts say people were abducted by aliens. Well, that doesn't mean much to me.
The scholars say the resurrection likely happened. The theologians, it's like alien abduction experts say alien abductions really happened. And, well, that doesn't help you.
Given that it's never been observationally verified, is it reasonable to expect that someone comes back from the dead? It's never been observed, never been seen. So is it reasonable to expect that it happened once when no one could see it and when no one actually reported on it at the time? No. In fact, the fact that people may have seen Jesus walking, if they report that.
That's why apologists try their damnedest to pull this material as close to the resurrection as they can, because the longer, even if it's a year or two, I don't think they realize it. They think that's close enough. So, dude, it doesn't take long for a legend to grow. Within a day, you can have a legend develop. Literally, within a day.
I'm willing to accept their belief that they did. But as Oliver Sacks has described it beautifully in a recent book, hallucinations are real to those people that experience them.
Yeah, I go to the literary approach instead of having to go down the hallucination path. Sure, you can do that. That's a plausible explanation. But what's also plausible or even probable is that they are writing literary works. The author is making you think this. You don't have to go down to the bona fide, let me try and get into the mind of the ancient person. You can also look at the well-known stories of the time and realize this might just be literature.
Now, the fundamental, Christopher Hitchens really presented the fundamental irrationality of the premise of a savior. We're asked to believe the following. First, that our God created our universe 14 billion years ago, except in many states in my country. and maybe Queensland. But anyway, then he waited almost 10 billion years before the Earth formed. Then he waited another 4 billion years until animals evolved. Then, over 2 million years, he watched as our poor hominid ancestors scraped out this meager, miserable existence without intervening. Then waited another 250,000 years as the first Homo sapiens began to assemble into families and tribes beset by hunger and illness, individuals who are genetically identical to us, essentially, and presumably therefore have a soul, but who are presumably still suffering through eternity without grace because he chose not to save them. But then, to introduce, after such remarkable negligence, he decided to reveal himself not in an era of video cameras like today, but in an era of Iron Age peasants, in a society at the time beset by myth and superstition, and not once since then. Come on.
Come on.
And worse, the fundamental premise of Christianity is so ridiculous that we are born sick and commanded to be well, as Christopher has said. So, the next aspect of faith and belief in God that's ridiculous is miracles. Now, I once quoted this, and in fact, last time we met outside of this country, Dr. Craig said, well, philosophers don't buy it, but I'd like him to explain to you what's wrong with the argument. Basically, it says if a miracle is something that must be of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish. I mean, it's so, as Carl Sagan would have said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Or as Fox Mulder would have said, I want to believe. We all want to believe, and we should recognize that, and that's what science teaches us. We are all susceptible immediately to the idea that coincidences are special. Something that happens to us means a lot. And often that belief resides in the discrepancy between the laws of probability and the workings of cognition. When something happens to you, it seems special. You can have 1,000 dreams that are ridiculous, and one night you dream a friend of yours is going to break their leg, and the next day they break their arm, you go, cosmic. But you forget all the nonsensical dreams. It's a natural tendency. And in science, we have to work against that. Coincidences happen. John Paul is now going to be a saint because some woman had a remission of a disease in 2011. Well, couldn't that just be a coincidence? As Feynman pointed out, the standards of proof in science are so different than those of the Catholic Church. In science, we try to prove ideas wrong as well as right. We don't just try and say, we like this, let's prove it right. And the best example I know, again, comes from Carl Sagan, Miracle at Lourdes. There was...
I just think it's fascinating that the Protestants took a scalpel to the Catholics, and they dissected their miracle claims and all the hagiography and the church claims outside of the text of the New Testament. They did a damn good job, and it wasn't atheists that were doing it, debunking these miracle claims. Eventually, that self-criticism applied to themselves, and they applied it to themselves, and eventually it gets inherited by guys like what you're seeing right now.
This apparition of the Virgin Mary in Lourdes, and many people have gone to bathe in the waters, and the Catholic Church keeps good records of it. And about 128 million pilgrims have gone there, and I think 56 have been cured of diseases, and they can say that they can't prove it's something else, and therefore they're miraculous. No one's regenerated an arm, but people have been in remission from cancer. But the interesting thing is, there's spontaneous remission rates of cancer in society, and if you actually look, the probability of having a remission from cancer if you go to Lourdes is smaller than that in the general population. But if you go to Lourdes and you come back and your cancer goes into remission, there's no way that I'm going to be able to convince you it's just an accident. And that's the problem of our own cognition and miracles. Now, the other thing that's obvious about what makes it unreasonable is the God that we've created is not the kind of... I mean, if you were a God, omnipotent, would you be so petty and jealous? Would you say, hey, let me get you to almost kill your son to see if you believe in me? Okay?
The way he danced while he did that. He's talking about Abraham.
Or, you know what? I want you to prostrate before me 5 times a day to show you love me. I mean, if you had an ant farm, would you kill the ants if they didn't look up at you every day and tell you how wonderful you were? Okay? I mean, it's just kind of, for an omnipotent being, he's pretty petty. Or she. And then even Christianity, which is supposed to be this loving religion, says, believe in me or go to hell for all eternity. Gee, thanks. Or, based on here's what I want to do. I'm going to kill my own son and torture him to absolve humanity from original sin associated with a non-existent forebear, Adam. I mean, it's nonsense. And if it was reasonable, it wouldn't depend on geography. What you believe depends upon where you come from. It's the U.S., you're probably believing the Bible and Jesus. If it's India, it's probably Brahmin. If it's the Islamic word, you believe in the Quran. It's the perfect word of God, and Muhammad is a prophet. And in fact, you'd have people, I've debated a clone of Dr. Craig's, in an Islamic clone, who uses exactly the same arguments to prove that the Quran is the word of God. The great thing is that the global access to information
it's interesting he's saying that they use the exact same arguments. Come on.
Means that people are now learning that they don't have to accept those things and can think for themselves. And for that reason, religion is monotonically decreasing. That unreasonable belief in God is monotonically decreasing in all of the internet accessible world. Now, science, that Dr. Craig talked about morals. Science develops morals without her being God in this case. I would argue that the worldview guiding the moral and spiritual values of essentially everyone in this room is not a worldview given to us by religion, but a worldview given to us by science. There's no need for God to do the right thing. Reason is what guides you. If you stop believing in God, and if Dr. Craig stopped believing in God, I doubt he would go out and kill his neighbor. Reason.
David would beg to differ.
Guides our actions, and reason based on empirical evidence and knowledge of the world. And in fact, morality evolves over time. In fact, Dr. Craig agreed that in our society, morality evolves over time because we learn things. We get rid of the immoral dogma of the Judeo-Christian religions. The fact that gays are evil. Well, we now know that in fact homosexuality is common in all mammals. It's not unnatural. It's absolutely normal. Women are not chattel. Unlike the last pope who's still alive, condoms don't cause AIDS in Africa. In vitro fertilization, allowing people to have children, is not evil. It's good. Now, there are certain universal morals which we can talk about. In my institute, we've talked a lot about them. You can ask, the different cultures have different reactions, and I don't have time to go in it, but they can be overruled. So we have biological responses that are hardwired. But even those can be overruled by reason. And I want to bring up an example which I used with the Islamic guy, and offended him incredibly. Maybe it'll offend all of you and Dr. Craig, I don't know. Involves incest. We all have a revulsion, a natural biological revulsion against incest. And there's a good reason. It's a biological taboo. Genetically, sexual reproduction by siblings is bad. And that biological revulsion means we have taboos against it, which then get enfranchised in societies.
So natural just evolution would end up ruling that out as an acceptable kind of behavior typically.
But I would have to say that let's take the example of a brother and sister, an adult brother and sister, who decide they love one another, decide to have sex, decide to use protection so they won't reproduce. Is that morally wrong? I can't say it is, frankly. Now, the best example that a belief in God is unreasonable is sitting next to me. I've listened to Dr. Craig over the days, and I've changed my opinion. I'm much more charitable. I came here convinced, based on my past interactions in his writing, that Dr. Craig was a dishonest charlatan. But I don't believe that anymore. I think Dr. Craig earnestly believes deeply in the issues he was talking about, so deeply, and as a man of intelligence, he is convinced that there must be a reason he believes that way, and he finds every possible rational argument that he can invent that satisfies him. So any argument that validates God is reasonable to him, and any argument against it is not only unreasonable, but wrong and worth distorting.
So that interpretation of Dr. Craig is what many scholars I've talked to, they think either charlatan or full of it or liar, or car salesman, whatever. And there might be a mix of this going on, right? But I think he really does believe it, but he also is self-deceiving himself by his own argumentation. It seems that I think Lawrence Krauss is hitting the nail on the head here.
Because it must be wrong. He's decided the answer in advance. And I want to give you some examples. The best example, one of the examples I used before, is this awful aspect of the immorality of the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, where God tells the Israelites to kill all the Canaanite children and women and children, and kill everyone in the cities. It's awful. That's the reason we're happy we've gotten rid of that. We don't know. It's in the modern world, we don't appease genocide because we say God did it. Or if a woman drowns her children because she hears God telling her to, there are places for people like that.
Yep.
And Dr. Craig likes children, but in order to validate this, this is what he's written. Why take the lives of innocent children? If we believe, as I do, that God's grace is extended to those who die in infancy or as small children, the death of these children was actually their salvation. God does these children no wrong in taking their lives. So in fact, if they were Canaanite children in that schoolroom that he talked about, it'd be okay. It's worse, though. It becomes more obscene. Who does God wrong in commanding the destruction of the Canaanites? Not the Canaanite adults, because they were bad. Not the children, because they get eternal life. It's the poor Israeli soldiers who had to kill them. They're the ones who are wrong. And then he's gone back and thought about it and says, you know what, I've rethought about it. And really, the real problem is the command was just to drive them out of the land. If they just left, they wouldn't have had to been killed at all. Only those who remained behind were to be utterly exterminated. That's okay. That kind of genocide, rationalizing genocide in that way is not reasonable. But those are the lengths you have to go to.
I cannot. That's so wild and insane to hear him say that.
I have about 2 minutes. Is that right? Now, what amazes me is that we've had these discussions the last 3 days, and Dr. Craig keeps repeating the same arguments, even when I've showed him that they're wrong, that the science is wrong. He used these arguments, and this is a version of what the argument he used today. Item number 2 is, if the universe had an explanation of its existence, that explanation is God. This was from his slide before. It's now called transcendence. But let's look at that. I mean, that is one of the silliest, unwarranted statements I can ever imagine. It reminds me of the Sidney Harris cartoon where there's an equation, and in the middle you can see, then a miracle occurs, and the guy says, I think you should be a little more explicit in step 2. I mean, I could replace God by anything in that, by turtles, or Zeus, or quantum mechanics, or better still, unknown. We just don't know it. But what logic is saying, if the universe has an explanation, it must be God? That's total, for a man of his intelligence, it's totally silly. Now, I just threw these things in. He keeps quoting Alex Valenkin that this theorem works. Alex Valenkin, wrote me an email after our first debate saying, you know what? It doesn't work when there's quantum gravity. It's not true. It's not even true in the multiverse. But he's so convinced that these arguments must be true, he won't listen to the fact that they're not.
You're talking to a theoretical physicist, and you're not listening to the theoretical physicist. That's William Lane Craig, baby. That's William Lane Craig.
Fine-tuning? You've already heard it. Life was fine-tuned. We got rid of it with Darwin. The universe can involve natural selection and the fundamental constants if there are a number of universes, for example. But the main point is, just like the fact that you and I are not fine-tuned for our existence, we get backaches because we're not designed to be sitting at computers. The universe actually could be tuned much better for life. This argument that it's fine-tuned for life is nonsense.
Wow.
And the last thing, Dr. Craig used 5 syllogisms. The problem with syllogisms is they're only good as the initial postulate. Once you accept that blindly, then you come up with nonsense. Let me give you an example. All mammals exhibit homosexual behavior. William Lane Craig is a mammal. Okay, I think you see where I'm going.
No, he did not. I have never seen anybody do that to William Lane Craig in a debate. If you know one, you better let me know. Let's see, this is about to wrap up. But damn.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. And it's nonsense because the premise is wrong, and you have to be much more careful in your premise. You can't be so simplistic. And the last thing I will say is that Dr. Craig the other day said the biggest problem for him in terms of understanding and believing in God was the problem of human suffering, and in this case, the suffering of animals. How could a compassionate God let animals suffer? Well, his answer is a compassionate God wouldn't, and therefore they don't. They're not self-aware, and they don't suffer. Now, the point is, and I guess I won't show it. I was going to show these videos. They're kind of remarkable. A group did a video saying, you know what? All the scientists say that all these statements about pain receptors and prefrontal cortex and all the things Dr. Craig was talking about are wrong. Every single scientist. Dr. Craig then did a podcast saying no and distorted it. They responded, and it's kind of amusing to listen to. And maybe I'll post it somewhere. But the point is, the reason Dr. Craig distorted what they say, and as I said, they quoted every scientist, let the scientists see their statements to see if they misrepresent them, is because he believes that a compassionate God would not allow it, and therefore animals must not suffer, independent of the scientific evidence.
So he's forced to his conclusions because of his beliefs. Forced.
And that's the problem. So to summarize, by replacing God with reason and empirical inquiry, science provides gifts in return. The universal invitation to question anyone's claims and the universal requirement to exercise due diligence and duty of care to substantiate those claims. What we call reason is testing your ideas against external reality, checking for internal consistency, and then testing again, and using that as the basis of future actions. That's what we call acting rationally. A belief in God doesn't satisfy any of those criteria. And my main goal tonight is not to worry about God, but to encourage the broad use of these gifts, because that's what matters to me. And I think that's what can make the world a better place. Thank you.
Holy moly. Oh, I never seen Lawrence Krauss bring it like that. He brought it. He brought it. What do you think he did there, ladies and gentlemen? Comment down below what your thoughts are about what was said. Dude, even the facial expressions on William Lane Craig from here were wild. I'd like to hear from you. Be sure to subscribe to MythVision Reacts and check the bell. When you do that, it'll give you an option of like all, and you can hit all, and it'll notify you every time we do one of these. Like the video, share it out there, subscribe, and until next time, see you then.